Pretty sure this is going to be the 5th time. 2012 in Orlando, 2014 in San Diego, Oceanside. I remember coming right from China with Mike Boyle, and there was only one room for the two of us. That got fixed. 2016, New Orleans, where I was a keynote. And then 2018, I'm pretty sure that was in Orlando again. At the time of filming, we're about 10 days away from the next TPI Summit, which will also be in Orlando. And I will be speaking now for the 5th time. I guess it's the 3rd out of 5 in one of my favorite places, but I don't get to pick where the places are. The talk that I'll be doing, oh, by the way, I say TPI Summit, where in these previous iterations, it was called the TPI World Golf Fitness Summit. I think now it's officially just the TPI Summit because the sports that TPI would encompass now include a lot more than just golf. But certainly the similarities of not only rotational sports, but really all sports and then all physical activities, they're all going to be governed by a lot of the same rules. And the two rules or series of rules that I'm talking about would be biology and physics. That's really, I think the title of my talk is The Truth of, you gotta run something that's somewhat sticky and maybe be able to have a little bit of clickbait, The Truth of Rotational Sports, Biology, and Physics. It does track back a little bit. I'm not gonna give away all the different storytelling that I'll do to open up my talk, but in the art of debate, in the sport of debate, there's a winner and loser. And part of a judge that decides winning and losing is making factual statements. And while this is not a debate, I am putting information out for someone else to consume. And I do want them to follow my information because I think it's right. So if I'm going to challenge somebody to accept maybe new information or adjuncts to what they do, I need to present facts. When it comes to biology and physics, you have every opportunity to question those facts because they're not going to be, you won't win that battle. And that's where, if we use biology and physics as the soil for all of this to grow some of these ideas, then I think we're gonna come from a very, very solid point where that make-believe judge is gonna declare a winner that's talking about facts. I'm going to position physics as our opponent, and I'm going to position biology as our weapon or weapons. And the good news is that physics is very finite. There's only a certain amount of laws in physics, at least that we know. And of course, we may know more things tomorrow, but that's kind of a straw man argument. If anybody were to challenge physics, then you have to prove this. You can say it, it might sound interesting. I don't think anybody's gonna get into a fight. If you're gonna challenge physics, then you should have some type of evidence that supports this. But biology is probably less finite. Biology might have a lot more options on how we can attack physics. And it's interesting because especially in baseball and golf, there's a lot of physics that are valued when the ball hits the bat and how the body may sequentially be getting the implement to strike the ball. But there's a lot of other physics that maybe are not valued as much. So we're going to talk about all of Newton's 3 laws, but the second one is force equals mass times acceleration. And the key of force tracks back to a previous list that I'll talk about, the 3 values, the 3 laws, the 3 rules of projections. Projecting an implement requires an efficient and an ideal height, an efficient and ideal angle, and maximal force. So then when we talk about force equals mass times acceleration. And I would actually insist that most people would agree with force equals mass times acceleration, as they should, but they would agree with it in the form of maybe using weighted clubs or weighted balls. Because if you increase the m, the weight, the kilogram, if you will, of your implement, but you can swing it just as ruthlessly, and you have the same acceleration. If m goes up and acceleration stays the same, force goes up. So what I am going to then take those factual scenarios and then bring my opinion into something that I think is missing, which is improving m in the human rather than just the implement. Where I might insist that if you add 10 pounds of fat mass, not fat-free mass, fat mass, and you can accelerate the same. And I will be mentioning all things equal and no changes in your technical skill, aka your sequence, you should have more force. If you have more force with the ideal angle and the ideal height, then the ball will go farther. You will throw it harder. All of these different things will happen. Now, if you also can improve your M with lean mass, that's probably a healthier component, but performance and health may not always be aligned. But now when you do have lean mass, that lean mass can be more opportunistic in participating in the motor skill of decelerating your swing. Deceleration isn't necessarily a part of how the force is created. It is a part of what creates the force has to deal with. So if I've got incredibly high degree of acceleration, I need equal and opposite, Newton's law number 3, that will have to decelerate. So if I have stronger muscles, not necessarily bigger ones, but usually a bigger muscle is stronger, and I then can utilize that. I said it will play into the opportunity to be part of a decelerative pattern. Maybe I don't even need to accelerate as much, because if I put a lot of M into the equation, then I may not have to A as much, so then I don't have to D as much, and it's the deceleration is where injuries will likely happen. Nobody gets hurt jumping. They get hurt landing. Almost all of our injuries are part of a deceleration pattern in our rotational sports. That's a component of physics that I'm going to illustrate. And then how do we look at biology, not just to improve M, but also to improve A, where limit strength would actually be a great way to improve lean body mass. So if you can improve limit strength, the likelihood that you'll never gain weight, even if you gained a little bit, is that a big enough number to move the dial of force equals mass times acceleration? It can't hurt. Because if your 100% goes up, meaning your limit strength, which is probably a big gap in rotational sports, then your percentage in your rate of force development, your dynamic effort, would be, let's say, 50% of a higher number. All things win. We think of the same thing with grip strength. You know that when you grip your implement, you're not gripping at 100% of your effort. But if your 100% was higher, and then you used half or whatever number it would be, that half would still have a stronger grip and still be able to likely deliver into the ideal technical skill or sequence. Now, I think the big problem with training limit strength is this fear that somehow you'll have so much hypertrophy that you'll change the skill. You'll have too much soft tissue approximation to run the same type of sequence or technical skill. You did it wrong. That doesn't mean physics is wrong. It doesn't mean that what I'm saying is incorrect. It means that you did something that was not efficient, no differently than you taught somebody how to swing the bat the wrong way or swing the club the wrong way. You trained the wrong way, because that does not have to happen. That you have to lift in a very particular way, you have to eat in a very particular way to create any type of particular adaptation. If you pick the wrong one, well, then that's a problem. That doesn't mean never do it, because never doing it would also then kind of allude and suggest that this second law of Newton would not apply to your sport. And that's really what I'm getting at. We're not allowed to kind of skirt physics. When we talk about biology, let's start by talking about the work-to-rest ratios of participating in the actual competitive sport. So it's 18 holes, it's 9 innings, versus how do you practice those unique skills. Those are two very, very different work-to-rest ratios. And the work-to-rest ratios in your practice are more demanding, meaning there's much less rest. So in theory, if you can be conditioned through that, then you'll be able to have elite levels of conditioning in your sport. That's how training works. You have to exceed the demands of your terminal activity, create those adaptations, and then you win. However, when we practice with these very short work-to-rest ratios, sometimes that person does not have the requisite fitness for those work-to-rest ratios. They have the fitness to play the game because it's easier, but they don't have the fitness to practice in an elite fashion. So there might be another layer or a more specific aerobic component to how they train, so that you can perhaps take the amount of maximal effort rotations in the cages or on the range and do it in this period of time and not get tired, because the same amount of whacks you would do in your competition would be over this period of time. And that's important to recognize. So we might find that you're just not fit enough to practice, even though you're fit enough to play. Those are two very, very different things. And what can happen is in the group of elite, meaning you're such a good athlete that you can get the implement onto the ball in a desirable fashion when you're really, really tired. That doesn't necessarily carry over to your competition. And maybe the example would be you have to work on your free throws when you're tired. No, that's not how it works. You'll make your free throws when you're tired by, number one, not getting tired and being great at understanding your body's free throw technique under the most ideal conditions. When you're tired, you kind of hope for the best. You cannot practice your motor skills when you have exceedingly high status state of fitness that is now losing to hypoxia and acidosis rather than staving it off or minimizing those effects. So we're going to talk about that biology as well. So we got kind of one example of physics and one example of biology, but really the main message is that you're not allowed to dismiss biology and physics, and I'm going to use these facts in the mode of a debate to perhaps help other people a little bit better in their sport. Check out TPI.com, Orlando at the Hyatt Grand Cypress, October 25, 6, and 7, I think. I think it's open to the public. Obviously, if you are TPI certified, there might be some preferred pricing, but hopefully we'll see you in Orlando.